Okay, good afternoon. I don't know how much you've all ever thought about gongs in your life, but it's something, a rabbit hole that I've gone down quite deeply here lately. It all started when I was looking for new cymbals for my drum kit. I've never been a fan of really bright cymbals, and the ones I had were just a little too bright. Well, actually, they were way too bright. I wanted something understated. And wow, that's a whole field unto itself. I mean, people really, really talk for hours about that kind of thing. So it's fascinating. I finally got that sorted, but as I was looking around, um, I just ran across a reference to a gong. It was actually at a drum shop, and they had a couple there, and the guy encouraged me to go ahead and take a look at some of the videos. Now, I have to admit that the only time I'd ever really thought about or encountered gongs was one thinking of a Far East setting, China or Southeast Asia, maybe India. I saw a gong used in Japan once for a ceremony, um, but pretty much limited to that. Second one would be a symphonic gong in, well, in an orchestra or symphonic setting. Usually quite big gongs, 56 inches, usually 140 centimeters, 150 centimeters. They even have made them for symphonic gongs as large as 80 inches, which is 235 centimeters. So really quite big pieces of equipment. And then the third place that I ever encountered them was watching videos of old rock groups like Led Zeppelin. John Bonham had a gong behind his drum kit. And then some of you might remember um, Roger Walters of Pink Floyd hitting this giant gong in the movie that they made in Pompeii in the song Careful with That Axe, Eugene. So uh, that's been my encounter with gongs. And I did not realize really what beautiful pieces of instrumentation they are and how widespread they are used around the world. Um, there's records of some of them being used anywhere from maybe 2,500 years ago to 3,000 years ago. Now, perhaps not quite the gong you're looking at right now, but some kind of brass sheet, metal sheet that they could hit. And they would be used for signaling, just like a drum was for the military, and for other reasons. The clocks are going to go off here. Um, but then over time, they develop, and then there's things like wind gongs, and this is called a Chau gong, Chinese Chau gong. And this probably came about in this form a little bit later, maybe 500 AD, 600 AD, but they're very much the product of the Bronze Age. And that was one of the first preconceptions that I had to set aside when people say, oh, knock you back to the Bronze Age, or they live in the Bronze Age. Well, people in the Bronze Age had already determined the circumference of the Earth. They could chart the stars. There were Pacific Island groups that were sailing vast distances in the Pacific Ocean without any GPS, without any sextant, things like that. So, we've got to be careful if we're going to insult with the Bronze Age. And then they made these types of things, these beautiful instruments. And of course, if you know about drumming, cymbals moved, around Southeast Asia, China, and then they became a center of excellence for makers and craftsmen in Turkey for actual drum cymbals. But um, now they're made around the world. China still has quite a strong presence in this, obviously. So my hat's off to it. The other misconception that I had to set aside, and I very feel bad that I actually had this one, is when people talked about, oh, well, use gongs for meditation or use them for something like that. I thought, oh, good heavens. I mean, are you going to get out the healing beads now and homeopathy and that kind of stuff? But a few weeks ago, I went to a professional baseball game, and it was astounding how loud it was, except for the times when the pitch was actually delivered. And it was down to the nanosecond of, okay, they got to stop whatever noise, and as soon as that was over, they could start up with noise again. And it was really rather tense. And I asked people I was sitting next to, I was like, does this bother you too? And they said, oh yeah, by all means. I mean, it's just, we live in a very, very loud, intense society, world over now. And so something like this, I thought, well, yeah, you come home and you hit this, and it sounds really quite relaxing. Now, this is a loner, so I'm going to take a look at it. But first thing I have here is just the friction on. And when I first heard this, it answered the question I'd always had about, wow, how did they get some of those sound effects in old movies that I used to have? Because you've heard this. They'll call it the whale tone, but it's tension back in an old movie, and it's probably accurate. Many of the movie studios had professional orchestras in house, and their percussionists were quite good. They had a lot of different instruments to choose from. So I have really starting to believe that many of those sound effects very might have well been brought about through the use of a gong here. Idea with that. Really, really interesting tones. Now, each of these gongs are hand hammered. They're bronze, and then throw some other alloys in there. But then they hammer them by hand, and so each one sounds different. This is a 28 inch, as I said, about 75 centimeters. You could have 100 of these hung up in a row, and each one of these would have its own little different specific tone. Now, if you remember from high school mathematics, sine waves, they can either complement each other, they can cancel each other out. And that's what's going on in a gong. There are millions of tones and vibrations being set into motion here when you do something like that. And so they propagate toward the edge and manifests itself as the tone you hear. My drum instructor said you just don't go up and hit a tone, gong, you prime it. You hit it just a little bit, get it moving, wake it up, get the frequencies, get the right frequency going to it, and then you can hit it a little harder. But surprisingly, other than what we might have seen in movies and Roger Waters, as I said, from Pink Floyd, really cranking back, you don't ever really have to hit a gong that hard. Now, this is a drum mallet. I use this to get a good sound from the drum cymbals, which are obviously way different from a gong. So this is a little harder, and you'll hear it. It attacks, it blooms, blossoms, and then you get a sustain, and then you get a decay. So now it's waking up. I don't know if you can quite hear it. And this microphone starts to blossom, starts to bloom out. I'll hit a little harder. Now this isn't really the mallet I would normally use for a gong. Just wanted to give you an idea of the different tones. It's a little heavier. It's about 400 grams, 450 grams, almost 1 pound. It's like a big rubber band ball, if you will. Bigger the gong, darker the sound. So listen to this. Wake it up a little bit. Big bloom, that big blossom. This was sustained for a long time. I was surprised at this. I hit it obviously a few times harder than this. Walked away, came back, and there was still vibration going. And what's cool about it, and what gives it the different sounds, is different parts of this will vibrate. I can put my hand up here on the edge, but the center is still vibrating. Vice versa, I can put my hand down there in the back, or the top is still edge, this rim I should say, is still ringing. So here, I'll give you one last idea of what this sounds like. Nice and low. Even lower. It's funny how many things are vibrating in this room. Nothing more than the slightest flick of the wrist here. Professional gong players usually don't play it in the center because they're effectively making music. I think more of it is evincing music. They're pulling music out of the gong. So they are trying for different tones, starting in the center and working out. So usually don't see them just go up and hit the center of it. But I'll give you an idea of what that sounds like too. Woken up, getting that nice tone. That'll have a beautiful decay to it. Very nice. So, anyway, very relaxing too. I mean, come on, just as I said, it really changed my mind about it. I thought that must just be something odd, but they're very, very relaxing things. They're very, very good tones, and 2,000 years plus of the design of these, and something that I think if you brought somebody back, excuse me, from that era, they would say, yeah, I recognize that sound. I really do. All right, well, thank you for listening.